Hello, book lovers. I'm Peg, back with another talk on 3 different books on the 62 book list of former Booker winners and shortlisters that our MOOKSE Madness group has put out. And it's really getting interesting on the Goodreads forum that I follow, because people are starting to talk about the books and read the books and give their viewpoints of the book. I'm putting a direct link to that particular conversation, and so if you're interested, actually I'm going to refer to something that just came out today by one of our moderators on his latest reading of one of the books I'm reading, and a question about it that I'm going to ask everybody. So you may want to follow that. So anyway, the link is there for that. Okay, let's go on with the books. I have 3 books today. These again are of the 16 authors we're reading. These are the 3 and their earliest work that we'll be reading. Okay, first we have The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark. This was published in 1962, was her first novel and really still her most well-known novel. Movie was made of it. Many are familiar with that. And it's actually the only one I've read, but I'll be reading 3 more. When I start a novel or get used to an author, I try to get a feel for the flavor of the author, and I look through several different reviews of hers, and I want to just quote a description of her writing that one of the reviewers gave all of her books in general, and it says it's an examination of the unusual, frequently bizarre behavior of a select individuals within a small, precisely defined social group. And that's certainly true of this one. And I think I've read an early one called The Driver's Seat that was very unusual too. There's some people on BookTube that are reading through all of hers, which I'll be interested in hearing their viewpoints and seeing more of theirs. Okay, this is about a teacher, Miss Brodie, in a girls' school that takes 6 of her students, girls, kind of under her wing, and they become her favorites in their own little special group. And it goes through the years, in some ways, a coming-of-age story of the girls as they grow and mature and look at themselves and Miss Brodie differently as time goes on. I have to say she did a great job with the way she described her characters. There was a fear when I started that, I've got 6 names to remember of girls and who knows what. So what she did was, at the very start, she named the 6 girls and she gave them one very distinctive characteristic that they were named of, like that described them. One was known for her beauty, one was known for being good in math, one was known for sex, and it was easy to remember those. So you got a feeling of the basic person, and then as the story went on, she expanded on this, and each girl became a distinct character in your mind. But I thought it was a real good way to do it, gradually introducing the characters rather than trying to do it all at once with each of them. This story is actually based on an experience that she had while she was at a girls' school, and a woman teacher that she had, who I guess was very, very much the Miss Brodie character. And she actually, when Muriel Spark began winning prizes, she donated some money back to her school in this teacher's name. Muriel Spark was born in 1918, and I think I said this was published in 1962. Come to think of it, it wasn't her first one, but it was near the start, and the other 3 we read will be later. And the rest of her books, I've heard comments that they are somewhat uneven. I know some people that started out to read all of them on my booktube friends gave up after a few when they liked some and didn't like others and didn't want to read all of them. Anyway, so I have to say also that she's does humor very well in her descriptions, in her interactions, and does something I'm going to be talking about later in this video about combining humor with extreme seriousness, almost tragedy in some ways. So I'll be addressing that way of doing things by authors a little later. Okay, next I'm going to talk about Julian Barnes, one of his early ones called Flaubert's Parrot. Now, Julian Barnes is 72 years old at this time, but he's still very much around. He won the Booker Award in 2011 for his book called Sense of an Ending. And just this year, 2018, he had a quite well done book put out called The Only Story that was touted that it perhaps make the Booker list, but the Booker list this year seemed to be about younger, newer authors. Anyway, this was written in 1984, published, and before that he was a literary critic and worked for, I believe, the New Statesman in that sort of world. And this was his breakout novel, and I have to say it's much different than his later novels, or the ones that I've read. This could very well fit on today's Goldsmiths Prize if it had been around there in what we call experimental or unusual literature. I would say this is quite postmodern and metafictional. It's very non-linear and fragmented. So, but anyway, I'll try to kind of tell you the basic plot, if there is one. Okay. It has a lot to do, I'll go backwards, with Flaubert, the French writer who wrote Emma Bovary, but it's not set in his time. It's actually told by a narrator, an old man who's looking into some things about Flaubert's life, and I guess he's a critic, and trying to determine different things about his life, and it helps if you know a lot about, or some about Flaubert himself and his, of course, Madame Bovary, that's talked about. Okay, but the parrot story comes in when he finds out or hears that Flaubert kept a big stuffed parrot on his desk while he was writing, and part of his research is to try to find this stuffed parrot, and he finds several that say they were the original parrot of Flaubert's, and so there's much talk about research and finding it, and just as I said, very unusually done. I was interested in it, but it could well be read again. One of the things that comes out is the reason this narrator is so interested in the story of Madame Bovary is because his own wife has recently been in an adulterous affair, and I guess he's trying to get over that. So anyway, I do want to say that Julian Barnes is very, very well liked by people in France. His parents actually were French teachers. I mean, they were English, but they taught French, and I'm sure he knows it well. And of course, this being about Flaubert's Parrot, this was very well and very famous in France. Okay, next we are talking about BERYL Bainbridge's, and the title is The Bottle Factory Outing. Okay, now first let me say the Bottle Factory is not a place where they make bottles. It is a place where wine is put into bottles. So that has a lot to do with the story. Anyway, a little bit about BERYL Bainbridge. She's kind of an unusual character. She actually was born in 1932, but all her life she told people she was born in 1934. And there was a little confusion, I guess, when she died, how old she actually was. She did different kinds of jobs, and even was an actress in one of the soap opera at one time. And this book deals with two English young women who actually work in a bottle factory, which she did between marriages at one point when she needed money. So it's very realistic. Just a little bit, the two young women are Brenda and Freda. They live together. They're very different, though. Freda is very domineering and likes things her own way. And even when they go to work at the bottle factory, bottling wine, as I said, she very much bosses everybody around and controls things. Now, there's a lot of social interaction because the bottling factory is owned by an Italian man, and he has brought a lot of Italian workers over to work there. So there's a lot of interaction between these young English girls and the Italian men. I do want to say that it starts out very funny, almost farcical in some ways when it shows the interactions, and there's times when there's things going on between the girls and several men in different rooms, and they're hiding from each other. It's just really almost a farce, and she does it so well. I always think it's when you can tell a lot about a writer when they do a crowd scene, and it remains perfectly clear to you what everybody is doing, where they are. Otherwise, I mean, if it's not a good writer, it's very hard to make out what's really happening if there's, say, more than 3 characters. And she does a very good job of this for most of it. Now, I have to say, and I'm not going to go into it, the tone changes dramatically towards the end. They do have an outing that Freda has planned, and much wine, and she plans for this outing where they all go out on Sunday and drink wine and have fun. And that's the whole story leads up to this. And it turns into sort of a macabre, tragic tone that's very interesting. And I have to say that on the Goodreads forum discussion, it just came up. One of our moderators, Hugh, just wrote an interesting comment that it reminds him this change in tone but keeping both a jocular, humorous tone with a tragic, macabre tone together reminds him of an English a TV program that he's watched, which I wasn't aware of. I might look it up because I've really come to appreciate that dichotomy of tone. And it seems to me that it's only English writers that can do this well. This having farce and tragedy along in the same story. And I wanted to pose the question to both the people on the Goodreads forum and to my viewers. Do you agree that English writers do this much better, combining farce with tragedy, than any American writers? I can't think of any American writers that do it well, except maybe Flannery O'Connor. Her short story, A Good Man Is Hard to Find, does this. And then she has another short story dealing with a man that seduces a woman with a wooden leg. I can't remember the story of it. But I would be really interested on your opinion on whether English writers, just in general, do humor better, and especially when it's mixed with tragedy. I have to admit, I'm a complete Anglophile. I always like the way English authors do things better than Americans. And that's one reason I'm really interested to read this list, because in the old days, everybody up on Booker list was from England. And so I'm enjoying this a lot. Okay, I've got my next 3 for next week already started, so I will be back later. And the viewers who aren't in the Goodreads list, you might want to click below and see the answers I get to my question of American versus English writers. And I would like to have all my comments here on BookTube if you have any answers to that question also. Okay, bye. See you next week.